You okay? You okay? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On the morning of November 29th, 2008, Luis Rodriguez stabbed Mazen Alwarad numerous times, causing his death. The stabbing was intentional, and the stabbing was unlawful. Mr. Rodriguez accepts responsibility for having committed the crime. He acknowledges his guilt. But as I told you 1 week ago, the question for you is not whether he's guilty. The question is, what is he guilty of? There are two choices in this case. He's either guilty of murder or he's guilty of manslaughter. Now, at the very beginning of this case, it was suggested to you that the facts here were black and white. I submit to you that the facts in this case are anything but black and white. First of all, let's set certain things straight. There never was a sucker punch in this case. It was raised in the Commonwealth's case that the physical confrontation began with a sucker punch. Well, it didn't. There's no question that Luis Rodriguez was obnoxious. There's no question that Luis Rodriguez, in his drunken state, in his buzzing state, instigated this fight. There's also no question, ladies and gentlemen, that Mazen Alwarad was a willing participant in the physical combat. There is no question that Mazen Alwarad had to walk past the door of that store to get to Luis Rodriguez. He could have walked in. He could have done what he threatened to do. He could have called the police. He made a conscious decision to engage in physical combat. Now, there's another thing I would submit to you that is not as clear as the Commonwealth would have indicated to you. At various times during this case, you've seen a photograph of how Luis Rodriguez appeared a few days after the incident when he was arrested. It has been suggested to you that he didn't suffer injuries. Look at the picture. You don't see a lot of injuries on this picture. But what do we know from Mike Bergeron, the detective involved? When that photo was taken, it didn't depict the injuries that Mr. Bergeron could clearly see. The bruising to the eyes, the swelling of the nose, the cut on the nose. That picture doesn't depict that. To hold that picture up and say, gee, was he even injured in this fight? I would submit to you is very misleading. Mr. Bergeron said something else. He took a look at Luis and he said, gee, his face looks much thinner today. I then had Luis stand up. And he said, whoa, he's really gained a lot of weight. Well, if he's gained a lot of weight and his face looks much thinner, what does that say about his face at the time he was arrested? It was swollen. It was swollen as a result of the blows that he had taken during the course of that fight. Now, I've already told you that this was an intentional stabbing. I've already told you that it was unlawful. What's the distinction between a murder and a manslaughter? I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, it's when and how the intent to commit the stabbing occurred. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the evidence in this case demonstrates that Luis Rodriguez seized upon that knife in the heat of passion as a result of the fight that he was in. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit further. But I do want you to understand that when you consider whether this was a violent fight, a violent fist fight, take a look at Lewis's right hand. Those marks on his hand were made by contacting Mr. Alwarad's face or his body. Take a look at Mr. Alwarad's hand. Yesterday, Dr. Cummings came in and said that that major contusion on the knuckle was not as a result of being struck with a knife. That was a result of blunt force injury. His fist going against Lewis's face. That's what caused the swelling and the bruising to his hand. This was a mutual fight. You know, the only way that we can determine what happened is through the witness testimony in this case. And I would submit to you that different witnesses had different views. It reminds me of something that happened to me when I was in college. About 40 years ago, I'm looking through the course catalog and I see that they're offering a cinema course. I decide, well, I'm going to get 4 credits for going to the movies. This is too good to be true. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in a dingy movie theater, off campus, black and white projector going, and I'm watching a Japanese movie in English subtitles, and I've got a paper due the next day on it. The name of the movie was Rashomon. It's a movie by the Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. And Rashomon is a story of an encounter in the woods between 3 people. And it's then told in 4 separate vignettes as to what happened during this encounter. The encounter deals with a husband, a wife, and a bandit who meet in the woods. According to the husband, he's walking through the woods with his wife, minding his own business, when suddenly they're set upon by this bandit who overpowers him, ties him to a tree, and rapes his wife right in front of him. According to the bandit, he's walking through the woods minding his own business when he comes upon this man and woman. The man is mercilessly beating the woman. So he goes to her aid, and he ties the man to a tree. She gives herself up to him in a show of gratitude. The wife's position is in the middle. But there's a 4th vignette that tells the story of what really happened, because there was a witness there, a witness that had no reason, no bias, no motivation to tell anything other than what he had seen. I submit to you that in this case, we don't have that one witness, but we do have an amalgam of witnesses. And we have, based upon the surveillance video, we have a 3-minute period of time where we can see what happened during the course of this altercation and how the altercation grew into, or exploded into, the death of Mazen Alwarad. First, let's talk about Louis Gonzalez. Judge Whitehead is going to tell you how you determine credibility in this case. And there are many different ways to determine credibility. But I submit to you that the first thing you look at is a person's demeanor. And you look at that person, you size them up as you would size anybody up during the course of your daily routine. And you say to yourself, am I going to make an important decision based upon what that person says? Are you going to make an important decision based upon what Louis Gonzalez says? Besides his demeanor, what do we know about Louis Gonzalez? Well, we know he's a liar. What happens as soon as the police bring him down to the police station? This is a man who wasn't even involved in the stabbing. I wasn't there. I don't know anything. Well, the police say, we know you were there. We know you were at the party. We know you've been talking to people about what happened. Okay, I was there. And then over the course of the next hour and 45 minutes, the police begin to get a story from Louis Gonzalez. Now remember, at this time, nobody's spoken to Philip Jefferson, so nobody knows what Philip Jefferson is. Get this story from Louis Gonzalez, and according to Louis Gonzalez, gee, the fight didn't even take 2 seconds. There was a swing and a miss by Louis. There was a connect by Mazen, And next thing you know, Lewis just jumped up, less than 2 seconds, and started stabbing him. That's the description of the incident from Luis Gonzalez that I submit is not consistent with the description from other scene witnesses. Why would Luis Gonzalez stretch the truth in this case? Why would he lie in this case? Well, what do we know? We know that when the police went to speak to Stephen Mello, the fellow who Luis and Luis Rodriguez and Edwin were drinking with earlier, they told Mr. Mello there are 3 guys involved in this. We're looking for Luis Gonzalez, Luis Rodriguez, and Edwin Torres. That's what they told Mr. Mello. What did Luis Gonzalez know about the investigation in this case when he went down to the police station? He knew what he read in the Lowell Sun. Doesn't matter whether it's accurate or not, and I submit it wasn't accurate. But Luis Gonzalez knew what he read in the Lowell Sun. There were 3 people involved in this stabbing of Mazen Alwarad. And I submit to you that when Luis Gonzalez was down in that police station talking to those police officers, he had that in the back of his mind. He was going to do everything he could do to divorce himself as much as he could from the incident and put the heat on Luis Rodriguez as much as he could and take it off himself. I mean, here's a man who says he never got close to the knife. He never touched Luis after the incident. Then how did Mazen Alwarad's DNA get on his shirt? He's still lying to you when he comes into this courtroom. I submit that Luis Gonzalez is much like the husband or the vandal. He's not the unbiased witness. The unbiased witness in this case, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, is an amalgam of people, 4 people in particular. And when you look at the surveillance video that you have, you'll see that beginning at 6:43 and 51 seconds and ending at 6:47 and 1 second, that's the entire incident. Why do I say that's the entire incident? At 6:43 and 51 seconds, Mr. Padilla has paid for his gasoline and is heading back out to the pumps. As he's heading back out to the pumps, he sees Mr. Alwarad smoking a cigarette. And he also sees 3 young men coming into the parking lot. He doesn't make much of it. He goes and starts pumping his gas. The next moment of import in this case, I would submit, is at 6:45 and I believe it's 7 seconds. Because that's when we have Mr. Vitalo walking into the store. And what did Mr. Vitalo tell you? Just as he's walking in the store, he sees 2 individuals who we know are Luis and Mr. Alwarad. On the left side of the door, he actually has Luis with his hand up over him, and they're talking very, very close to each other. And what he hears at this point, he assesses as a threatening remark, a fair assessment on his part. What the problem? You don't even speak English. That's what he sees as he's walking in at 6:47 and 6:45 and 7 seconds. What do we have next? And by the way, I want you to consider in this case the way in which Mazen Alwarad has been portrayed as a much smaller man. We know from Dr. Cummings that Mazen Alwarad was 5'5" and 165 pounds. I submit to you that's a middleweight. That's not a particularly thin, slight person. That's a well-built individual, although 5'5" for a man may not be that tall. What do we know about Luis Rodriguez? At the time that he was arrested, they took the descriptive information from him. And what is that information? 5'8", 3 inches taller than Mr. Alwarad, 165 pounds. The same size as Mr. Alwarad, basically. Anyway, Mr. Vitalo sees what he sees and hears what he hears. continues into the store. At 6:45 and 47 seconds, what you have is Mr. Jefferson walking out of the store. What does Mr. Jefferson see? When Mr. Jefferson walks out of the store, he sees Mazen Alwarad still in the same position on the left side of the door. Lewis is no longer where Mr. Vitale had seen him, right next to Mr. Alwarad. He has Lewis on the other side of the door. Lewis is still being obnoxious. As Mr. Jefferson walks out, Lewis says, "I respect you, man, but I don't respect him." Whatever that means, Mr. Jefferson says, "I don't want any part of this. I don't like what's going on, and I don't want any part of this." In go the buds from the MP3, and he starts walking out of the parking lot. And he tells you that he gets to this grassy plain here when he thinks he hears something, and he turns around. And when he turns around, what does he hear? What does he see? He hears Luis Rodriguez challenging Mazen Alwarad to a fight. At this point, Lewis has moved to the corner of the building. He's moved further away. But he definitely challenges Mazen Alwarad to a fight. And what happens at that point? Mazen Alwarad takes up the challenge. As I said, he doesn't walk into the store, which is right next to him, to avoid the conflict. He doesn't call the police to avoid the conflict. Whatever sets him off, whatever snaps at this point, Mazen Alwarad advances on Luis Rodriguez. Mr. Jefferson told you, not only did he advance, Lewis retreats. We go from the number one to the number two. The number one is where the challenge was leveled. That's when Mr. Alwarad heads towards Lewis. Lewis retreats to where the number two is. There's no question, as Alwarad gets upon him, Lewis throws the first punch. He doesn't do very good with his first punch. There is at this point a flurry of punches. Mr. Jefferson described the situation. He had a perfect view, standing right here, looking back. This is what he saw. He's not a witness because he wants to be a witness, because he knows either of the parties. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and saw what he saw. And what does he see? He sees a flurry of punches, and then he sees Mazen Alwarad and Lewis both go down with Alwarad on top of Lewis. Well, we have another witness in the parking lot at this point, and that's Joe Padilla. Mr. Padilla is pumping gas into his car at this point. He hears somebody go, "Stop, stop." This gets his attention. He turns around, and when he turns around, what does he see? He told you. He's got Mr. Alwarad down on one knee, holding Lewis by the collar with his fist cocked. That's the position he sees them in. And at that point, and he assumes, there were two inferences drawn in this case, by the way. One was by Mr. Jefferson, who drew an inference that Mr. Alwarad worked in the store. How did he draw that inference? He drew that inference because he wasn't wearing a heavy coat. At the time, it was very cold out. He saw him smoking. He assumed he worked at the store. A fair inference. Mr. Padilla, seeing the gentlemen in the positions they were in, he also made an inference. It was Lewis yelling, "Stop, stop." And what does he see at this point? He doesn't see any stabbing. He sees Mr. Alwarad let go of Lewis, stands up, brushes himself off, and starts walking back to the store. Well, that's precisely what Philip Jefferson saw. He saw Mr. Alwarad get up and just walk back to the store. There was no retaliation at that point by Lewis. He didn't jump on him. He wasn't stabbing him at that point. The stabbing occurred before Mr. Alwarad let go. Lewis flailed with that knife. He flailed with that knife as he was being beaten, and as soon as Mr. Alwarad let him go, he stopped flailing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about justification. We're not talking about excuse. What we're talking about is mitigation. Judge Whitehead is going to tell you the law of murder. He's going to tell you the law of mutual combat. And he's going to tell you how that may affect your decision in this case and what the options are for you. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, a fair review of the evidence in this case shows that Louis Rodriguez did intentionally stab, did unlawfully stab Mr. Alwarad. But when he did so in the heat of passion. And he did so in the heat of passion arising from that violent, sudden, and mutual combat that they were engaged in. Is this a crime? Yes, it's a crime. There's no question it's a crime. It's a serious crime. It's manslaughter, ladies and gentlemen. It's not a crime.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes.
When a person throws a punch, and the punch is unexpected, as I stand in front of you all, and you challenge someone to a fight, and that person stands up, and you throw that first punch without warning, without notice. Some people might call that a sucker punch. The problem with Louis Rodriguez that night, he didn't have the skill to back up his mouth. He was a coward. He carried a knife. Where'd you get your knife? Why do you need the knife? He's taller than him. Maybe the same height, maybe bigger, who knows? But he missed on that punch. And you look at the damage, both on the photograph and how counsel described it as the detective described it. Puffy under the eyes, swollen nose, cut across the bridge. That's a one-punch broken nose, ladies and gentlemen. Anyone who's seen a fight in their lifetime, that's the damage caused by a punch to the nose. There's no other damage to his face, to his jaw, to his lips, to his teeth. One punch. But there's a lot of damage to his knuckles. And you'll see the photographs all across the knuckles. What's that caused by? Damage to Mr. Alwarad. And I would suggest what witnesses saw of Mr. Alwarad throwing punches was blocking stab wounds. He just got stabbed in the groin, ladies and gentlemen. Think it hurt? Then he sees the knife and it's coming out of his chest. And you'll see the concentration of 3 stab wounds within a distance of 2 inches in the middle of his chest, with enough force that it penetrated the sternum, cut ribs, 5 inches in depth on some 3 in others. How did he get that knife wound on his left wrist, left hand, Mr. Alwarad? Was that blocking a knife, which caused it also to hit his face? That wasn't mutual combat, ladies and gentlemen. Mutual combat is 2 guys, 2 women, standing and fighting. But Mr. Rodriguez, being the strong, brave man that he is, brought a knife to the dance. And when Mr. Alwarad, 3 inches shorter, knocked him down, Mr. Rodriguez retreated to that well-known bastion of bravery. He pulled out a knife, and he stood up and put it right up through the testicles. And you'll see a photograph of the pants. That cut is right in the middle of the seam of the crotch and the anterior leg. Goes up through the testicle, out the top of the scrotum into the groin, and severed and ripped apart that femoral vein. But he wasn't content with just that. And you saw Louis Gonzalez. Ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't a choir in the parking lot, it was Louis Gonzalez. It was a cast of characters ranging from blue collar to white collar to whatever you want. He said he wasn't punching him like that. He was going like that. He was stabbing. Louis Gonzalez knew he was stabbing him. Mr. Brady didn't know what he had in his hand, but when he saw the fight abruptly stopped, Louis Rodriguez put his hand up in the air. I still got. He only heard 3 words. What's the 4th word, ladies and gentlemen? I suggest I still got it. And he jogs away. And he catches up with Louis Gonzalez with a smile on his face. I got him. I got him. Close, blood's dripping. Blood on the sweater, minuscule. Unable to be seen without a microscope. That's what the chemist said. Russ Vitello walked in the store, 6:45 thereabouts. When you see Mr. Jefferson leave, and then time it to the point that Mr. Alwarad comes back in the store, we're talking less than a minute and 10 seconds. A minute and 10 seconds to go from getting through work in 10 minutes to dying in 15. Why did Mr. Rodriguez confront him? What did Mr. Alwarad do? He gave him a cigarette. He lit the cigarette from him. Shadi, his friend, had walked out to the car, so I'm giving him a cigarette and light it for him. And he made sure there was not a problem before he left. Then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, Louis Rodriguez got his hand up by his head, screaming at me. You don't even speak effing English. What is your problem? For what? And what does Mazen Alwarad do when Louis Rodriguez is yelling at him? He goes like this. Then the challenging continues. And Mazen tells him, leave before I call the police. And Louis challenges him. Now he's still on 7-Eleven property. And he walks over towards him. There's no jog. There's no charge. He walks over to him and he's greeted by a punch. Brady see mutual combat in the sense of both punching each other. But I would suggest the punching that Brady saw was Louis Rodriguez stabbing him and Mazen Alwarad trying to stop him. And counsel suggested to the doctor understand this. Did Mazen Alwarad run into the knife? Is that what caused the force to go through the sternum and the ribs? What about the force through the testicles, the cut to the face, the cut to the hand, the left side of the chest, the left side of the stomach? I can tell you why. I would suggest why the fight abruptly stopped. Mazen Alwarad was going into shock. He was losing blood. And if you look at that video, ladies and gentlemen, you see how he walks in the store, right behind Russell Vitello at the counter. kind of walk, and I would suggest like this here, to the back of the store. And the accuracy of Mr. Padilla and the accuracy of Mr. Jefferson. Well, Mr. Jefferson figured he was the clerk because he wasn't wearing a coat. Well, look at the photo, ladies and gentlemen. Look at the video. Mazen Alwarad had a heavy, black, puffy winter coat on, going out the store and coming in the store. And you heard the chemist describe the damage to that black, puffy jacket with the stab wounds through the front. And Mr. Jefferson also used words up there that he never told the police in his written statement, as he acknowledged. Ladies and gentlemen, the body tells you what happened to Mazen Alwarad. The photograph of Louis Rodriguez tells you what happened to Louis Rodriguez. One punch to the nose. And let's keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, his first words to the police, I wasn't there. Second set of words to the police, I was in New Hampshire with my girlfriend. Louis might not be that smart, ladies and gentlemen. The hotel received his backpack started the day after the murder. November 30th. November 29th at 6:49 a.m., thereabouts. He was putting a knife 7 times into Mazen Alwarad. 7 times. Actually 8 times, I apologize. Hiding under a workbench in the basement after he saw the police in the front. It is tragic, but not what happened to Louis Rodriguez. It's tragic what happened to Mazen Alwarad. Louis Rodriguez created his own scenario. He devised the scenario. He had the knife. He made the conscious decision to pull out that knife as he's on the ground because his punch didn't work. I can't lose this fight. And he never once threw another punch again, didn't have a knife blade in it. And what was he thinking each time he put that knife into Mazen Alwarad? What was his intent each time he put that knife into Mr. Alwarad? 3 times in the center of the chest, hit the pericardium in the heart. 3 times. And once up to the groin. Was he trying to scare him off? Was he thinking about killing him? What made him pull the knife out? What made him open it? What made him use it? Was he thinking about that? And what about the pain Mr. Alwarad had? What about the amount of wounds? The location of the wounds? The manner in which inflicted? The joy that Louis Rodriguez celebrated as he ran back to his friends saying, I still got it. And I got him. With a smile on his face. The law will be given to you by Judge Whitehead. When you look at the testimony, or reflect on the testimony. Reflect on that morning. Reflect on Mazen Alwarad. Going out to have a cigarette, minding his own business. In a situation created by Louis Rodriguez. As you sitting there, me standing here, and Mazen Alwarad dead. Created by Louis Rodriguez. caused by Louis Rodriguez, thought of by Louis Rodriguez, precipitated by Louis Rodriguez. I'll ask the jury to find him guilty. First-degree murder under both theories, deliberate premeditation, and extreme atrocity of cruelty. Thank you.